Thanks for joining me today. My name is Jonathan Petrino. I'm on the committee for Boise Entrepreneurship Week. I'm joined today by Kristen Armstrong, three-time Olympic gold medalist and owner of Pivot, the leading Boise fitness studio. Kristen, anything you'd like to add today?
No, I think that you nailed my title, but also, truth be told, I obviously am an entrepreneur. I probably just one of my favorite parts of my role every day is I'm also a mom to an 11-year-old son who's in 5th grade. And so, between being a business owner, a retired professional cyclist, and a mom, I look forward to this chat, and I thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to cover a number of topics today. I think, some personally, what's transpired in your life, how it's led you here, and then some of the challenges I think that you face there too. And then also, pun intended, how you're pivoting your business to keep up with changing demand, taste, but also the environment that we find ourselves in. Maybe you could just start and tell us about why you founded Pivot and what the original vision for the company was.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm super excited to say that the name Pivot came well before the pandemic. And so now I feel like people ask me all the time, like, Pivot, that's interesting. Did you open during the pandemic or before the pandemic? And so I don't know if it was just like this sign, but we have not only named our business Pivot prior to the pandemic, but we've had to pivot many, many times in the last 18 months. But the reason why Pivot is, truth be told, I never set out to open up a gym. My dream was never to say, I want to provide a gym for the members of the Treasure Valley. But really, with my background, a lot of people know me as a professional cyclist, an Olympian. But truth be told, I worked in healthcare for a long time. In fact, I graduated at the University of Idaho in exercise physiology, worked over at the Portland Adventist Medical Center for their wellness program, came over here, helped open up the West YMCA as a director, and then also transitioned while I was training and racing. I worked for St. Luke's Health System, which is our largest employer in the state of Idaho. And over time, after I eventually retired, after coming out twice of retirement in my professional career, I decided that I needed to, what was going to be fulfilling enough that didn't require me to land on a podium in the Olympic Games, because I obviously came out of retirement twice because I couldn't figure out what was going to stretch me to the extent that the Olympic Games did, because that's like the pinnacle of sport. And for me to find the next pinnacle in life was really, really difficult for me. And so I thought my dream was to have what I call a normal job. And that normal job was working for corporate USA, at a hospital system. And boy, I had such an amazing opportunity and experience there. But truth be told, in my competitive blood, I just wanted things to move quicker. And I think that just is how it is when you have that entrepreneurial mindset. And I had an opportunity in front of me to build a fitness center I guess the way it was proposed to me was, how do you see healthcare and how would you like to turn the dial on health? And can we do this through a fitness center platform? And it was almost like this aha, dream come true moment. And I realized that it had to be a facility that not only had a membership component in classes and a community, and we had to bring, that environment to fruition. And I call that phase 1, to drive the services that I really wanted to get to, which now has just recently launched, called Pivot Health. And this is like the preventative medical arm of Pivot Lifestyle and Fitness. It's now closing the gap on access to healthcare.
Yep. And that's, one of the questions too is those values I asked you about, like the values were never just provide a place for people to work out, right? The value was like, how do I, impact health in the Treasure Valley, and how do we make people actually healthier, right? Which I think fitness and the facilities that you're providing are certainly part of that. But, you mentioned Pivot Health, which I think we'll definitely talk more about. Right. So it's very, very interesting, the journey, but also the several pivots actually that you've done to get here, right? Which ultimately it sounds like where you really wanted to be. If I could ask you about some of the roadblocks that you've had, imagine there's many, many roadblocks on the path to become an Olympic athlete. And then obviously in business, we were talking a little bit before this about your career and how you got here. Maybe you could just talk broadly about what some of those roadblocks are and how they help you today, or maybe some of what the roadblocks you're still dealing with are. And it's something that, entrepreneurs are very adept at dealing with.
Yeah, I think that truly the pathway that has led me to be an entrepreneur and the lessons learned. I mean, even I think about when I was 5 years old, I think about the character values and the character traits that I learned just from my childhood and my dad being in the Marine Corps. And if you look at that through traveling every 3 years, helped me become more resilient, to graduating from Okinawa, Japan, I always say landing in Northern Idaho at the University of Idaho, and really having to adapt to almost a new culture and trying to figure out time management, and obviously progressing to become to the level of the athletics that I reached. But all of that, life has barriers, and we might not recognize our learnings from those barriers in the moment. But the character is probably the number one thing that has helped me succeed throughout my career and also as an entrepreneur. But some of those that are vivid to me as a professional cyclist, probably that correlate mostly to pivot, are the ones that were setbacks medically. They were orthopedic injuries. They were my 4 hip surgeries, my spine surgery, my broken collarbone. You name it, they were true setbacks. And you think about riding bikes and you think, well, that's a pretty non-impactful sport you got yourself into. So what really has helped me is, obviously we can all say the cliche, when life knocks you down, you have to get back up. But what I learned actually even deeper than that, when I wanted to start and launch Pivot, is that people truly, the connectivity in healthcare today, and really trying to get the care you need and to take care of yourself in a preventative way, the access is not attainable. It's not, you can't even touch it. And so I really wanted to help others receive the same kind of care that I received throughout my setbacks and journeys. And the other piece that isn't so on the physical side is the mental side.
Yeah.
And the mindset it takes to persevere. And I have this mantra. So my event mostly was a time trial where you race from point to point all by yourself over a 35-minute period. And so you can imagine how we all get in our own minds and talk ourselves in or out of things. And my mantra always was, am I hurting? Can I hurt anymore? And am I hurting more than everyone else today? Because if I'm not, I'm probably not winning the race.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how I feel sometimes with Pivot, because I'm like, every day I feel like if I'm comfortable, I'm not winning the race. I'm not winning that race of being an entrepreneur. And I recognize this really quickly because of my laser focus that I had in sport.
Yeah. Yeah. The having the physical perspective, right, of something that you can't just push through necessarily sometimes with a severe injury, or knowing that, your limit and you can push through, probably gives you a lot of perspective then on the mental side, right, when you're approaching the sport of business, as it were, as well.
Absolutely. And I think that business and sport have great parallels. And I think that how you treat each when you want to be successful is actually, it's the same. It's the same. You have to wake up each and every day and focus on doing everything you can to transcend. Most of us ascend, which truly to be successful as an athlete or a business person isn't enough. You have to actually go beyond ascending, because that's what everyone else is doing. And then you have a handful of people that don't make it and they descend. But transcendent focus is truly what is going to differentiate you from the rest of your competitors.
How would you recommend, I just want to dig in on that a little bit. How would you recommend not that there is an average entrepreneur, but, for the average business owner or somebody out there, how would you recommend they go about trying to get some of that perspective? Because that seems like something that's, very unique to you as a, elite level athlete. How would you recommend people go about building that body of perspective so they know that, hey, they have the wherewithal, am I ascending, or do I have the ability to transcend, as you mentioned?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. There's a lot of times people ask me, how is it that you take, when people say all the time, you don't know what you don't know. So I work with athletes all the time that when I suggest a way to transcend in sport, they're like, oh, I would have never thought about transcending in sport like that, because they didn't know that they could take their bike and make it 2 pounds less. And so one of the things in business that I like to speak to when we take ascendant mentality to a transcendent mentality, because I have no doubt that we wake up each morning, we want to transcend, but are we truly transcending?
Yeah.
And first and foremost, I think that this sounds like something that your teacher would tell you, but it really does work. I really recommend that you write down all the ways you believe that you're ascending in your own business, and think about everything you wrote down and look at those and go through them. If there's a list of 10 things, ask yourself truly if your competitors are ascending the same way. If they're doing the same thing, then that's truly that's what you need to do to even be on the playing field, and the same playing field. And then you need to surround yourself by a team, and that's your environment. And your environment has to include people that believe in you, because if they're questioning you and they're telling you how, when I was at this company 10 years ago, this is how I did it. It's like, no. To transcend, you have to think, you can't, if anyone ever brings up, this is how we used to do it, that's great. But you have to think about ways, transcending is thinking about ways that nobody's ever done it. Mm-hmm. And so that's why you need a team to really think about, it's not about whose idea it is. It's about collecting thoughts and really breaking through how you can go further. And the hardest and the challenge about this exercise is that you're coming up with something that no one's ever done before. And so transcending isn't something that is a walk in the park and here's a book on how to do it. Yeah. It's truly, really thinking outside the box. And it's possible. And I did it in sport, and now I am embarking upon this transcendent way with an environment of people who believe in the vision. And then I also have the other environment of people asking me, so what are you doing and why? But you have to just believe that people are going to question things that haven't been done before. That's okay. That's okay. In fact, if people are asking you questions, then you're probably doing the right thing.
Yeah, it's a good sign, because if they weren't asking questions and they would just accept whatever you were doing as default, that would be successful. Yeah. I love the little tidbit there about making a list of all the ways you're ascending and then comparing that to what your likely competitors are doing. Because I think we can. It's good to take stock of our progress, but also recognize that other people are also likely making the same progress. So, obviously, in the fitness industry, your business was heavily impacted by the pandemic, which is ongoing. We should mention. How has that affected your strategy, the ways your business was ascending? And what are some of the changes or pivots, as it were, that you've made to adapt to the times that we find ourselves in?
Well, I think that during the pandemic, all businesses, large or small, were affected by the pandemic. And the unique thing about the pandemic is that it wasn't just one blanket way we were affected. We were all affected in our own unique ways. So sometimes not even relatable to the next business person. And so there wasn't really anyone to go for advice. I mean, you're thinking, well, does anyone know? Can you project what's going to happen? And that was the unknown about COVID, and we're still in it. But I do know one thing. I was surrounded by business owners who pivoted quickly. They had great people, and their model shifted how it needed to shift. to still deliver an amazing product or service to their customers. Yep. And then there were businesses who thought, well, my hands are up. I'm just going to close down business. And I guess I'll just take these next 3 months and just kind of disappear for a while. And I took the approach where I've never worked so hard in my entire life.
Yeah.
When we shut down for 2 months, those, you would think business operations shut down. Whew, I'm going to take a deep breath. It's not in my control. But truly, I think the last year, but those 2 months specifically when we shut down were probably 2 of the hardest months that I've ever worked in my life. And that was because we had to take our business, which was in person. Mm-hmm. We were all about being a community and providing, amazing structured classes and gym. And we had to go virtual. And not only did we go virtual within 4 days of shutting down, in fact, we didn't know we were shutting down. And within 4 days of knowing we shut down, we started delivering online classes live right away. Well, yes, within 4 days. And I use existing platforms that people already were on. And I didn't get too caught up into, oh my gosh, what's the best platform? And how long is this going to take to launch? I just made it happen and blasted it out for free to the entire world, because it was the only way I can reach everyone really quick without companies who I would say their expertise is in going live with classes. It just took too long to make happen. So I got to do something right now so that my members are it was all about retention. How much can we retain during a shutdown? By the way, we shut down, and when we opened up again, we opened up the 1st of June. You can imagine the gym industry in the summertime.
Yeah.
So we shut down April and May, and we opened back up, and everyone wanted to be outside. Nobody wanted to be inside. And so our retention was the name of the game. And so not only did we go live with a lot of our classes, but we also developed a delivery system that was on an app. So now people can work out from home, and they also can have customizable programs right from their phone at home using equipment that they could find in their house. And so we knew we had to be super nimble and flexible, but we had to deliver something to match the value of their membership so that people weren't going to quit on us.
Yeah.
And we were incredibly successful. And when we did reopen, the changes that we made were, luckily, we were two buildings built from ground up. So we were brand new. We had the right air filtration.
Oh, great.
We upped our cleaning. We lowered our class sizes, and we marketed that. We spoke about it, and we lived by it. And we kept distance, and we let everyone know that it was safe, and that we let everyone know that it was about mental health and not always about physical health. But at the end of the day, because we held true to these values, these core values, somebody told me during the pandemic, they're like, "How you doing?" And my first response was, "Well, this is horrible because we had to shut down. I've lost some members." And they said, "Well, you've just lost some members?" I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Listen, Kristin, I know how you think of winning, and I know what your projections were, but if you're treading water right now, you're winning." And I thought, I'll never forget this person that said, I was like, wow, you're right. If we're treading water, we're winning. Mm-hmm. And I just kept that mantra in my mind is I'm not about treading water. I'm about always excelling and going. But there was a moment during COVID that we had to not get frustrated on sinking. We had to we had to accept treading water just for a moment. Yep. And just be a little bit patient. But since we shut down, that was a year ago, and we reopened, we've had great success. And we are probably, I would say we're nearing doubling our membership since COVID, which, that's huge success. So I'm super excited about where we are, what we've done, and the pivoting maneuvers that we've had to make.
Well, and big congratulations to you and your staff, because that's, that's really something. You mentioned something I want to make sure that we circle back to was you said it was within 4 days you were delivering content or modality of workout content, right, to your members remotely, rather than wait for it to be perfect or do it maybe even the way that to the standard maybe that you would have wanted to do it. You just had a bias for action and said this is not perfect, but we're going to do it anyway. I think that's key. And there's so many. There's a lot of advice and a lot of tools and a lot of ways for people to spend time thinking about how they're going to do things perfectly. But that seems to be a theme routinely as I, speak with business owners and even in my own career, like just the bias for action and making something happen right away, even if it's not quite perfect.
Oh, I'll tell you what, my nickname in the sport in my career was type AAA. And I can tell you that making that call, because when I go back to some of those videos right now, I almost have a panic attack because they are by far from perfect. But I can tell you that our members, they love our coaches. And so as long as our coach was delivering something, they didn't care. They just wanted to see that coach again every day, especially in a live way. So we deliver that live. And then if people couldn't make the live sessions, they would go in, it would be recorded, and they could go back at any time during the day and watch those. Yeah,
that's great. That connection that your members have with the staff and the coaches must be difficult to replicate in that area. There's a whole, I think, line of thinking, at least in like the technology space, where if you're not embarrassed by the first version of something that you've done, then you waited too long to launch it.
That's kind of like that. Yeah, I feel okay, good, because I was embarrassed. So that's awesome. I appreciate that. And, the community at Pivot, people ask, so what do you think has created change, and why does Pivot stick out the way it does, and why are people joining Pivot? And it's not rocket science, but I can tell you that I'm going to go back and date myself back in the 90s, we used to speak in the fitness world about it. The conversations used to be, oh, so where are you a member? And people would say, oh, I'm a member here, or I'm a member there.
Yeah.
And now in the last 5 to 10 years, we're so busy that we're just hopping from one place to the next, whether it's jobs or fitness centers. We're not really, unless you're a member of a golf course or a golf club, it's not really spoken about as much because people aren't taking the time. They're running out, they're on wait list. And now I wanted to create an environment where people just stopped for 1 second and took a breath out of their life and actually had other people. And it creates empowerment. And so when people ask, what do you find makes your programming and Pivot successful? And I'll always say it's the community that we've grown. It's not me. Our coaches are amazing, but it's the community themselves that have kept it alive.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that's easy to overlook when we talk about, what types of products or services we're providing and all of the things competing for people's attention like that. The community and also just the members getting to meet other members, right? Not just the relationship. It's worth mentioning that the members have with the coaches or the staff. It's also and I've seen that firsthand, full disclosure, I'm a member, but the relationships that people build right with other members.
Absolutely.
Worth stating. So obviously the business has been through a lot. And you mentioned at the beginning of our chat here, the vision that you had was to really bring a new awareness of health and a path to health for the Valley. Maybe you could talk about Pivot Health itself, the product and the service offering that you have, why you decided to do that. I think you touched on that a little bit, but maybe just discuss how you're working that into the service that you're providing today at Pivot.
Yeah. So our vision since the beginning has always been that we want to bring in a health component side to our business model. It's not traditional, but it's not anything that we've just come up with. We have just been patiently waiting for the right timing with the pandemic. And what this is that we want to bring providers to Pivot, and we have brought providers to Pivot, primary care providers, along with registered dietitians. We have a mental health partner that you can access. And not only is it for members of Pivot, but it's for people that aren't members of Pivot. As our Treasure Valley grows, it's really, really hard to find access. But on top of that, okay, truth be told, when we used to go to gatherings, sometimes the topic of conversation for me before opening Pivot was, so when was the last time you went and got an annual exam? And most of my friends would be like, I don't even, maybe 5 years, maybe 10, I don't know. And you get to a certain point in your life where you will know more and more people who are not surviving. And it's all around things that they could have prevented. I don't think that people don't want to go to see a provider. I don't think they know how to go.
Yeah.
So what Pivot Health is all about is we know why. We know why we should go and we should take care of ourselves. And when we go into our doctor's office, we typically are told what? We're diagnosed with something. And we're told that you have prediabetes. But then nobody shows us how. And Pivot wants to be the how. And we have providers that are healthy. They're practicing what they preach.
Yeah.
And I think the facility also, what makes us very unique is that it's a very comfortable facility. It's clean. It's not stuffy. It's not intimidating because, I mean, let's face it, who wants to walk into a hospital when you're not sick? Yeah. And so we just want to provide ease of access. And on top of that, we also want to help people trust healthcare. So we're all paying for insurance. Mm-hmm. And we need to take advantage of what we're already paying for. And we're not taking advantage of that because I'm sure, like all of you, myself, I feel like I've been a victim of that medical bill that you open up in that mailbox and you're like, oh, please, I do not want to open my mailbox today. And you see a logo of where you just got taken care of, and you have a bill that could be hundreds or thousands of dollars.
Yeah. And
so we really want to help the general person navigate healthcare and be very transparent around, all right, so this is, from most insurance companies, is going to be no cost. However, because you want X, Y, and Z, then this might cost X. But also when we start getting into the referrals and referring to specialists, we want to take care of you. We want to refer you to specialists that we trust and that we've experienced with. And we want to make sure that we don't just like push you to a referral and then you make 8 phone calls and can't get in. We want to make sure that that connection is made. Yep. And we feel like there's a gap. And that was at the very beginning of the idea and vision of Pivot. And now even more so, the pandemic has caused us not to go in. I mean, 10 times as much. And so recently just found out about a gentleman who decided to skip his PSA screening for 1 year during the pandemic and has just been diagnosed with a very, very severe form of cancer. So that is truly my passion. And Pivot Health is needed more than ever now. And we're here to help. It does come from the heart. It's a very emotional delivery because it's truly what I wanted to do for so long. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot that's, I won't say broken, but certainly inefficient, right? With the way that we seek care and the way that we receive care. And you're totally right. I think there's a lot of feelings wrapped up in going to, right, your primary care provider, if they're in a hospital or even if they're not, right? It's not typically a place that you look forward to going. And where people do, normally have more positive feelings about going to, right, a fitness studio or a gym. And I think it's a really inspiring kind of pivot to think about, I'm going to go to this place that I feel good. That's, where I know people, you're kind of extending that community then into the healthcare provider space. It's interesting. If I could ask you, why do you think other people in the fitness industry haven't done the same thing? So if we talk about all the ways that the fitness industry is ascending, you're transcending it. Why do you think other people aren't doing that maybe?
Well, number one, I think it is something that, sometimes you wake up and you think that that's out of my lane. So that'd be very difficult to accomplish. But I would say that as I was talking about this model to a gentleman that is an executive at a large company out of Boise, he happens to be from England. And he told me when I was telling him what we were doing, he looked at me and said, oh, he's like, that's interesting. He goes, though you think this is a new idea, he goes, this is how it is in the UK. And I go, what are you talking about? He goes, well, with the insurance they have over there, basically you get your annual exams and labs done at your local fitness center, and that it's required. In fact, in order for you to have your insurance, and in order for you to go in and seek help at any time, you have to do this once a year. And so I didn't, truth be told, I didn't even know that. And
interesting.
And so obviously it's happening in other countries. It hasn't happened here, except for if you look back in, I would say in the early 2000s, 90s, there's a lot of, I wouldn't call it, I would say it's fitness center-ish, where they do a lot of fee-for-service. They have a lot of fee-for-service offerings. So you might want to get a VO2 test or a stress test, or you might want to get your BMI checked, or you name it, but it costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
What I'm doing and how we're trying to pivot is we're creating access for something you're already paying for, which is preventative healthcare.
Kristen Armstrong, thank you so much. Very insightful. I know a lot of people will get a lot out of this. So thank you for sharing your experiences, and please stop on down to Pivot, I imagine, to learn more about what they're doing down there.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate your time.